Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is a case for forgiveness, or the case for forgiveness with Dr. CPoe. And we're fortunate to have Dr. Poe with us because he has been with us on a number of occasions. And at each session, he brings a lot of excellent information. And Dr. Poe, as I said, we're just delighted to have you here. But now, what I'd like to do this morning is to talk about, as you indicated, a case for forgiveness. What is the case for forgiveness this morning? And I guess after we talk about your background, your education, and some of the things that motivated you to do what you do, then I think we'll talk about the question to you will be to give us the case for forgiveness. Why should people forgive? But first, let's talk about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to us this morning.
I came to Tennessee State University in 1956. Finished there in 1960. I went to Meharry and finished there in 1964. Did an internship in Chicago and was drafted into the military. And after I completed 2 years in the military, I came back and did a residency in psychiatry in Berkeley, California. And was in practice in California for a period of about 9 years. Came back to Nashville in '76, where I worked at Meharry Medical College for a while. And for about the last 2 years now, I've been in practice, private practice in Dixon, Tennessee. I'm also an assistant minister of a church in Laverne, Tennessee called Christ Miracle Chapel.
And so, Dr. Poe, you've been involved in this whole question of forgiveness yourself for a long time, and you really have counseled a large number of folks in terms of the idea of forgiveness. Ordinarily, though, Dr. Poe, when we think in terms of dealing with forgiveness, I think that we think in terms of the church more than anything else. But you're trying to broaden that as a psychiatrist this morning to tell us the case. What is the case for why should people forgive, Dr. Poe?
Well, there's been quite a bit of research done over the last, I'd say, 20 years. And the research shows that there are health benefits for persons who are willing to practice forgiveness. I'm reminded of some research that was done a few years ago at Stanford University by a psychologist by the name of Dr. Fred Luskin. He took two groups of students and he advised one group to imagine getting even with persons who had hurt them in the past. He advised the other group to imagine forgiving those people who had hurt them in the past. They did muscle tension reading and blood pressure readings before the experiment began, before he asked them to either forgive or to get even. And they found out that the group that practiced forgiving persons who had offended them in the past, their muscle tension was lower and their blood pressure had dropped some. So we know from a number of studies now that the practice of forgiveness has a beneficial effect not only on the body but on the mind as well. It enables people to have better relationships, it lowers blood pressure, enables you to cope with stress better, and so there are other benefits as well.
And I think, Dr. Poe, you would admit that today there are so many instances that we can talk about where forgiveness has not been the primary consideration, and that because of this, this has led to a large number of tragic situations and et cetera. Let's talk about some of those individuals who did not think about forgiveness from that perspective.
Well, you know, let's go back to the massacre at Columbine High School some years ago. I think it's been about 10 or 12 years ago now. Those two students who perpetrated that violence, I think they were on the receiving end of bullying. We also know, based on the information we have about the murders that occurred at Virginia Tech in 2007, that the perpetrator there, Cho, had been bullied to some extent, had been teased. We don't know exactly what the situation was with James Holm, the person who committed the massacre at the theater in rural Colorado. But we do know he was somewhat of a loner, and it's possible that he experienced some abuse himself. And so if those persons, the Columbine students, the Cho at Virginia Tech, and I think very likely James Home, if they had been persons who were prone to forgive, I doubt seriously whether they would have taken the acts that they did.
And so forgiveness is a very, very important consideration for all of us. Is that what we're saying?
Very much, because a lot of violence, one-on-one violence, and violence towards groups has a lot to do with revenge.
Okay, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.